Hello everyone in today's session, and today we'll be covering JavaScript, right? So what exactly is JavaScript? Well, JavaScript is a programming language like C, C++ or Java, although it's not related to Java, only the names resemble, that's it. But anyways, JavaScript is kind of a special type of programming language. It's special in a way because it's one of it's the only programming language that actually runs in the browser. And when I say it runs in the browser, I mean that it actually runs in your browser compared to other programming languages that run in your command prompt or your system or something, right? So JavaScript was actually written to run or execute in your browser. So this right here, the console, the debug console, is where you can check your JavaScript. So how do we access the debug console? It's really easy. Right click on your page, go to inspect element. Until now we have only been using the elements tab in here, but right now we learn about the other tab, that's the console. And this console right here is where you can see or log your JavaScript or something, right? So let's get started, and I'll be explaining the basic JavaScript syntax to you guys, and also how to use JavaScript in your projects and what we can do with JavaScript. I'll also be explaining the core concepts of JavaScript with all the logical parts. So without a further ado, let's get started, right? So right now I'll only be using JavaScript. So how do we use JavaScript? It's similar to how we used CSS, right? So when in case of CSS, we wrote a style tag, and then we wrote all our CSS inside the style tag. So we can do the same for JavaScript, but instead we write a script tag, and the script tag is the place where you are going to write your JavaScript. So let's start with the simple statement. So whenever we want to print something on the console, so that's we can do that using console.log. So I can say console.log and pass a string in here. What's a string? Anything that's inside a single quotes, double quotes, or a backticks. Backticks are basically that key, below your escape. Okay, that's what a backtick is. So all those three can be used to declare string in JavaScript. So right now I'll be using single quotes, and we can say hello world. Let's save this, and I'm already using the live server, so the web page is automatically gonna get refreshed. And now you see in the console right here that hello world has been printed, and that's been printed by JavaScript. And you can even check that index.html line 48 prints that, right? Inside the script tag it says hello world. So I guess that's how JavaScript works. That's the simple print statement. Now you can't actually take input in the console if this thing comes to your mind, like if we can print something, and we must also be able to take user input. That's not how we take input in JavaScript. Rather, we use HTML for that, right? So it is kind of like the other programming languages, but there are some features that are missing, and there are some features that are not present in other programming languages. So we'll be covering that. Okay. So that's how the basic print statement works. And now we can easily declare variables in JavaScript. So to declare a variable, and let me be very clear, I'll be using the ES6 syntax. So to declare variable, you have some keywords, and the first keyword would be let. So you say let, then the name of the variable, and I can initialize it like this. It's totally fine. Or I can just say let j, and then initialize j somewhere else, right? So uh, both are correct. So you can either initialize a variable right away, or you can just declare it and then initialize it or assign some value to it later on in your code. Now let's print both of the variables. So let's say console.log. So I'll be printing I comma j. Let's save it. And yeah, you can do this in JavaScript. You can print multiple values separated by commas. Console.log takes multiple arguments. So now you see it prints 0 followed by 100. So 0 would be I, the value we initialized, and then j is 100, so that's why 100 is printed. Okay, now unlike C, C++ or Java, JavaScript is not a statically typed or strongly typed language. So there are no concepts of data types, right? So let's say I can say that j is 100 right now, or I is 0 right now, and on the other line I can now say j is hey. So I can say that I was basically a number or an integer to begin with, and then I change it to a string, and it totally works. It works totally fine. So it won't throw you an error just in case you mess up the data types, because there is no concept of data types in JavaScript. Okay, so that's how you can declare variables, and you can also declare some constants. So let's say I declare constant. Let's say I say const pi or pi equals to 3.14. Okay, so I can easily print that as well. So it prints out 3.14. Now what's the difference between using const and using let? The basic difference would be, let's say I have this const, and let's also have another variable. So let I equals 1. Okay, by the way, that semicolons are not even important. You can totally skip the semicolons. It's just a better practice to write them. It's my habit actually, and my ID adds them anyways, but you can totally skip the semicolons. It's not required in JavaScript. Okay, just in case you want to skip the semicolon, just go to the next line, and JavaScript will automatically understand that that's the end of that line. Okay, now I can right now I can say that I equals 10, right? I can totally do that, and let's print pi comma I in here, and we see it prints 3.14 and 10. So 10 is basically the updated value. I initialized I with 1, and now I initialize it with 10, right? But the point is, because I can do that because I use let. So that basically lets you modify the value of your variable. But when you say it's a constant, so I can't say something like pi equals to 20. It's gonna throw me an error. Let's see that, and it basically throws me an error, and the error is kind of self-explanatory: assignment to a constant variable. So the point is, since pi was a constant, so I can't modify its value. I can only initialize the value once. That's it, right? I can't change or modify the value, maybe append it, maybe add something to it or something. Okay, I can change the value of a constant. Also, another syntax that you see is that I can say something like let I, okay, and then assign I equals to 0 later on. But what if I try that with pi or a constant? Let's say const pi, and then say pi equals to 3.14, right? Again, it throws you an error. This time it says that missing initializer in constant declaration. So basically you can do that either. If you're declaring a constant, you have to make sure that you also initialize it during declaration, right? So this would be a valid syntax. The previous one wasn't. Okay, that's great. Now what if I don't actually initialize pass a value to let I? Okay, so I just initialize it and I try to print it. What will the output be? So it would be undefined, and that's it. The basic or the default value of any variable except for const. So any variable that is described using that let keyword would be undefined. So if you don't assign it some value, default value would be undefined. That's just a property of JavaScript. Okay, it's great. Now let's try to connect our HTML and JavaScript together, and I'll be covering the if-else statements, the for loops, and all that. I'll be covering all of that, so you guys don't have to worry about that. But first of all, I'll try to connect HTML with JavaScript. So let's say that I create a div, and I give it an ID of let's say my div. Okay, it's great. Now I can access this div in here, this HTML div, from a JavaScript, and doing it is really simple. What I can do is I can say that let me create a variable, and let's say it's a constant variable because the value won't be changing. So I can say something like my div, and you see I'm not actually using this minus sign or this hyphen because in JavaScript that actually means something. That means the subtraction operator. That's an arithmetic operator. Rather, I'll be using this camel casing. The first letter of the first word is smaller, and then every individual word starts with a capital letter. That's kind of a convention in JavaScript or in most of the programming languages. So that's what I'll be doing. So I can say const my div equals to, and by the way, you could have used let in here as well, so it won't be a problem. You can use const or let, it totally depends on you. And just in case you don't understand where to use const, you can go, with let all along. It won't mess up your code or something, right? Okay, so I can say const my div, and then I can write something like document dot query selector, and let me type that for you as well. So I can say document dot queryselector. Okay, so documented query selector. And what document dot query selector does is you pass in an ID or a tag name or something, and then it just returns that HTML element. So we'll see how we can do access that. And then you pass in an argument that's a string, so it either starts with a double quotes, single quotes, or a backtick, right? It's basically enclosed in that. And then just like we did in CSS, I want to access this div, right? So for that I can uniquely identify this div using this ID, right? So how do we access IDs? We use a hash, and then I can say my div. Okay, for now let's just console.log it. So let's just print what my div is. Say console.log my div, save that, refresh it, and you see it returns you this exact HTML part, right? So JavaScript returns you this HTML part, so it has access to your div right now. So now I can do weird things with my div. Let's do something. So I can say my div dot inner HTML, and inner HTML is basically the first thing that I'm going to teach you. So we can insert some HTML code or some text in our HTML div using inner HTML, right, from JavaScript. So I can say my div.inner HTML and then pass in a string. You could pass in a number or a string, anything you can write in. So I'm gonna say, let's say insert, sorry, inserted by JS, right? Inserted by JavaScript. Save this, and now we see that it says inserted by JS in here. Let's zoom in it a bit. So now it says inserted by JS, right? If I go back to my sources in the elements and I check this out, so I see that now it has inserted by JS, and that's been inserted by this JavaScript. But if I check my source code using, by the way, I pressed Control U, and you can totally ignore all this script. It's been added by my live server, so you can just ignore it, right? But the point is that when I go to my source code, I don't see inserted by JS because that's not in the source code. I didn't write that in my HTML, right? It's totally empty. That's been added by JavaScript, and that's how you can dynamically add content in your HTML using JavaScript, right? So let's remove that, and let's try something else. Let's use a for loop to print multiple stuff or keep on appending stuff, in that div, right? So what we can do is we can use a simple for loop, and for that the for loop is really simple. It's totally similar to other programming languages. So let me walk you through the syntax. It goes like for, and then we declare a variable. So let's say let I, we initialize it, let I equals to 0, followed by a semicolon. Then we pass in a condition. So it goes on initialization, condition, then increment or decrement, like, or updating the value. So let's say for I equals, or let I equals to 0, then I say I less than 11, right? Or I can do something I less than equals to 10, and then I can say I plus plus. What I plus plus does is it basically increments 1 to I, right? So if the value of I is 1, then, and I write I plus plus, then the value of I would be I plus 1, so it would be 2, right? That's it. Okay. And now I can write something like my div dot inner html equals to, mm, let's say I, for now, right? And what's the output that we expect? We would expect something like 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10, right? Let's save this and actually check what the output is. And there's something that we didn't actually expect, right? Let me zoom in a bit again. So here's something that we actually didn't expect. We see the value as 10, but I guess that we wrote a for loop, and then we, added it. The point is that it kind of overwrites that value. So for the first iteration, it would say that I equals to 1, so the inner HTML value would be 1. Then it overwrites, then so the value becomes 2. So that inner HTML is basically being overwritten by a JavaScript. So maybe we don't want that, right? So what we can say is my div.innerHTML equals to my my div dot innerHTML, plus, sorry plus I. Okay, I'll say what plus is doing right now. And now you see that we get all these values in here. I'll tell you what the plus means and what it does, right? For now, if we see that we get all those values, they are on the same line and look kind of weird, but yeah, at least it's working. So now what's the plus sign and what is it doing? Okay, for let's remove this for loop for now, or I'll just comment it out. So that's how you comment something in JavaScript: double forward slashes, and everything is commented out. Let's add some text in here, right? So I'll add some text in here. It's a lorem, and then I wanna access this text in here. We wanna access the inner HTML. Right now we have been writing the inner HTML of a tag in JavaScript. Maybe I want that value. Okay. So what I can do is, let's say console.log. I'm gonna print it. I'm gonna say my div dot inner HTML. Let's save this. And now you see, if I go to my console, it prints out lorem, right? It does actually print out a lot of stuff, some blank spaces or something, but you can ignore that. It's only been added because of this IDE, this padding in here. Now you see, it's just lorem, right, with no extra spaces or nothing. So it's simply lorem. It prints out. So I can get access to the inner HTML or the inner text in here using this inner HTML. I can even change it. I'll get access to it, right? Okay, and that's great. I'm gonna comment this out for a bit. Let's say I have this string. So let's say a equals to hello, right? And then I'm gonna say console.log a plus, I'm gonna add a string to a. And when we add two strings together, it's called concatenation, so those strings will be merged together. So if I say something like hello world, a plus world, it would do something like this: hello plus world, right? Those strings have now been concatenated. So maybe if I add a space in here, you'll see it better. So it says hello world. So and later the catch is that if I say something like console.log a right now, so I see the value of a has not been changed, right? The value of a has not been changed, but rather it remains the same. And on the previous console.log, I'm just outputting, or logging the value with a concatenated with this world, that the space world. Okay, so I can totally do that. I can also do something like a equals to a plus the world, and right now I'm overwriting the value of a because I say a equals to a plus world, and the value of a was hello. Then we add world to it, so basically we are concatenating both the values. So now if you see it prints out or logs out hello world, right? Is the behavior that I want, and that's exactly what we were doing in there. So it's the exact behavior or the exact stuff that we were doing in here. We're saying my dev.inner.html equals to my dev.inner.html plus I. So for the first iteration, the inner HTML would be blank. Let's also remove this. Yeah. So for the first iteration, the inner HTML would be blank. So we add, and by blank I mean it would be something like this, just two double quotes, no space or nothing in between. And so we'll add 0 to it, and then we'll go on adding 1, 2, and all that stuff, right? Okay, so it works. Right now we see it works. But what if I want all those on a different line? So I guess it's kind of really simple. How do we get stuff onto the next line in HTML? We use a BR tag, right? So what we can do is we can concatenate multiple strings. In here I'm gonna say BR. That's it. Let's save this. Now you see it does that, right? And if you see, it also adds a BR in between here. What we can do is we can add the BR at the end. Save this. Now you see that it prints out all the numbers followed by BR, and here's how the inner HTML looks. So it's 0 BR, 1 BR, and so on, right? It's just as simple as that, and that's how we can easily write something in here. And we can also print out a table in HTML. And I also want to show you the latest syntax for the ES6 syntax. So let's say, so I'm going to keep this right here, right? And so let's say that we want to print the table of 2. So I'm going to create a number right now. Let num equals to 2. Okay, so I'm already assigning the value, and then I'm going to print out something like num plus, I'm going to add a multiplication sign, it's just an x, num into, then I'm going to say I. Okay, then I'm going to say equals to, so it's basically equals to plus, and then in the bracket I'm going to say num multiplied, and for multiplication we use the asterisk symbol, right? Let's save that, and now you see it's print out something like 2 times 0 equals to 2, and let's add a BR in here as well, so that all the text is on the next line. Let's save this. Now you see we can easily print a table in here. 2 times 0 equals to 2, and it goes up to 2 times 10, right? So yeah, this stuff works. But there's a catch in here. What we see is that there's a lot of plus operators, a plus symbol and all, and also we can skip that. So we can easily skip that, and there's this really easy way that we can skip this. The first change that I'll be making is I'll be using a shorthand operator. So I'm gonna comment this out again. Okay, and you remember I can write something like num equals to num plus 1. Sorry, it's gonna be plus, right? and then when I console.log num, let's save this, I see 3 because the value of num was 2 and then I added 1 to it. But there's a shorthand operator that I can use, so I could say num plus equals to 1 and it's going to render 3 as well. So now what is this plus equals to? Num plus 1 equals to, it basically means num equals to num plus 1. Okay, or to generalize it, when I say variable, okay, then let's say it's an operator equals to some value. Okay, it basically means variable equals to variable then operator then value. Okay, so when I say num plus equals to 1, so it means num is equals to num plus 1. I could say num asterisk or num multiplied equals to 2, so it means num is equals to num into 2, right? So that's something I could do in JavaScript. I'm going to comment this out, and let's now uncomment this. So instead of writing my dev.inner.html equals to my dev.inner.html something, I could easily say, let's check this out if it works. And yeah, it's working right now, so it does work after all. And I could even reduce this, so I'll be using a latest syntax using backticks. Remember those friendly backticks? I can write anything in backticks, and instead of using a plus operator, when I use backticks, I can interpolate values in here, right? If any of you guys were in my Python video, you might remember the f strings. So that was interpolation at the end, right? So I can interpolate something in here as well. So right now let's say I want to say the value of I, sorry, the value of I is colon, and then to print out the value of I need to write dollar and followed by braces, and anything that I write inside the braces would now be actual JavaScript variable. So I can write I and then add a br in here, save this. Now you see the value of I is 0 1 2 3 4 and all. Okay, so anything that I write inside a dollar and a brace, so that I can write JavaScript variables directly into my text right here. By the way, this syntax won't work with single quotes or double quotes, to be precise. So if I save this, then you see it prints out dollar I just like that. This syntax is only valid using backticks. Okay, so you guys need to remember this, and I'll try to hammer this into your head as well. So now instead of writing all that cryptic looking syntax with plus signs and all, I can easily write something like, let's say num x I equals, and I can even perform operations in here. So I can say num asterisk or num multiplied I, and then add a br in here, save this. So now we see it works the same way, but it looks much better. The syntax is much smaller than before, and it's much understandable. It's much more understandable, at least to me. So it doesn't matter how you guys write it. You can either interpolate string or you could use the concatenation operator. It totally depends on you. So yeah, that's how you can do it. So that's really simple. So that's how you would be doing it. And right now I'll be commenting out the script tag. So we are done with this script tag right here. Okay, and I'll leave all the script tag for you guys to understand, and then I'll just create another script tag in here. And continue my work in here. So just like we created console.logs, we can also create alerts in here. So we can also create alerts in JavaScript, and this syntax is really simple. Use the alert function and then pass in a string of some kind. So let's say this is an alert. This is an alert, right? Let's save this, and now you see that this right here is an alert. So I can press OK. Yeah, and it's fine. So this is how you can create alerts in JavaScript. So maybe you can use alerts to give the user some response. Maybe submits a form so you could say, yeah, your form has been submitted or something, right? It's great. Now let's create something else. Okay, let's create an element, and for now we'll create the element that we have used the most, our button, and then give that button an ID. So I'll say my btn. Right now I'm not using any style, but you can also style the button. It's totally up to you. Right now I'm just trying to cover the base concept of JavaScript, uh, enough concepts so that we can create little projects and all. Okay, and let's write something in here. So I can right click in here, and here's my button. And just in case you are wondering, I've included a style.css, and in the style.css all I've written is the basic ritual: margin 0, padding 0, right? Okay, so let's say we want to do something when we click the button, right? So it's really simple. uh, for that we need event listeners in JavaScript, right? So first of all, let's get access to that button. And how do we do that? We say const, then name of the variable, let's say my btn. And it's really a convention to write the IDs or the class names within a minus sign, and then access them by creating a variable of the same name using camel casing. Anyways, we can say document dot query selector, right? Then since it's an ID, I'll be using hash, so my btn, right? And then I want to listen to some events. So a click, maybe an hover, click, hover, double click, long press, short press, key change, key up. So all these are basically events in JavaScript. Okay, so your JavaScript code will be looking, or will basically just keep on looking to your page, and whenever someone clicks on a button, an event is triggered. So you can add a listener to that particular event. You need to explicitly add a listener to that particular event. So what the listener would do is it would just wait until that someone clicks on that button if it's a click listener, and then execute some code. Okay, so for that it's really simple. We can what we can say is there's actually two ways to do that. So the first would be add an on click. Okay, on click is basically an attribute, and then inside the on click you name functions. So let's say on QTTONCLICK, and like this. So basically you need to execute that function, and now in here we need to create that function. So how do we create a function? We use the create function keyword, and then followed by the name of the function. So function on button click. Okay, then we add these brackets in here to signify that it is a function after all, and then we write the function body inside the braces. So it's just a simple syntax. So let's say alert. We can alert something. We can say clicked, CLICKED. Okay, let's save this, refresh our page. When we click on it, you see it gives us an alert. Okay, so I guess it's really simple. That's how you can do it. Since I'll also be briefing you guys about ES6 syntax. ES6 is basically the latest JavaScript or TypeScript syntax that we will be following from now on. So all these let and const are actually have been introduced in ES6. Before we used to use something like called the var keywords, and the function that I've created right now using this function keyword and all, these two are kind of old-fashioned in terms of JavaScript. Right now there's a new and a better way to create functions in JavaScript. So let's do that. Let's create a function. What I can say is, instead of creating a function, I'll be creating a variable that is basically a function. Let me show you how that works. So I can say const, then the name has to be the same, so I can say on, PUTTON, on button click, then assign it to an arrow function. Arrow function looks kind of like something like this. Okay, so this right here, this syntax, this literally weird looking syntax is basically an arrow function. So now this syntax right here is going to tell you, or tell your JavaScript that this is a function. And just in case you're wondering how do we take arguments in here, so that's here in this brackets, square brackets, you can take arguments. Okay, so I can write the same stuff in here. Let's say alert ICKED. Let's save this. The page is now refreshed and click it. You see it says clicked, right? So it's really simple. That's how you do it. You add an on click attribute, and there's actually another way to do it. So let's see that. I'm gonna remove this, and then what I can do is I can say my button, my btn dot add event listener, add eventlistener, add event listener, then name the event. So I can say click, click, then comma, and then pass in the function that you want to execute. So I can say I can just pass in the name of the function. Remember that I'm not writing something like this. I'm not writing these brackets in here. These mean that I need to execute that function. I'm not actually executing the function. I'm just passing a reference to that function. I'm doing that intentionally. It's actually needed for you guys to do that. Remember, don't add the brackets. The brackets are not needed. Let's save this. I refresh the page, and now if I click on it, it works, right? So it totally works. And let's say we remove this function, so we can also create an arrow function just inside this, so we don't have to create an external function and then add the name in here. Rather, what I can do is I can just create an arrow function like this inside here, and let's pass in an alert as well. So I can say, okay, let's save this, let the page refresh, and now you see when I click on it, it says button clicked. So you can follow any syntax that you want, right? So you can either add the on click attribute, or you can use this add event listener. My preference would be to use the add event listener, because yeah, that's just looks way better, but you can use any of them. Okay, and there are even a lot of other events that you can get used to. So I can say something like window is basically the global object, so it's this page right here. So I can say something like window dot add event listener, and I can listen for the load event. So once the page is finished loading, I can execute some JavaScript in here. So let's console.log something, console.log page loaded. Save this. Let's refresh the page. Now you see I get page loaded in here, right? So whenever my page loads, I get this page loaded, so I can do something else in here. So if you go to some other websites, even to our HSPM website, sorry, right, So you see this Rubik's cube and all, this is basically a loader. So what we do is that we create this loader, or we created this HTML loader in here, and then once the page load, we are basically removing that. Okay, so we can easily do that as well. So okay, let me just comment it out for you guys, so we can use them. And let's say that we have, now we want to increment some some kind of counter. So what I'm gonna say is, let's add a para tag in here, or let's say we add a strong tag or bold tag in here, and I can say something like, you know, let's add 0 in here. Let's save this, and now we see 0 in here. And what I want to do is, when I click the button, instead of having an alert, I want to increment the value. So I can, let's say, let count equals 0. I'm going to initialize it, and then give this strong tag an ID. ID equals to counter, counter. Save this, and then get access to it. So I can say const counter, and now instead of using dot query selector, there's an another method that we can use to select elements by ID as well. It's called document dot get element by ID. Get element by ID, and in here you can just pass the ID without the hash, because we are explicitly telling it that we need to get the element by ID, right? So let's say counter and document dot get element by ID, and then on click, when we click it, let's increment count. So we can say count plus plus. Okay, and for now let's just console.log it, so we can log it to the console. Let's count. Save this. Now when I click on it, look at the console, the counter keeps on increasing, right? So it's working. Now basically I don't want to console log it. What I want to do is that increment this value, right? So I can do that. So what I can say is, counter dot inner HTML equals to count. So if you want to, right? Let's save this. Let's go back. And now if I click on it, you see that counter increases. Every time I click on this counter increases. And just like that, we can also add a reset button in here. You can say button button, passing an ID of let's say reset, reset minus vtn, and say reset reset. Let's save this, and in here I can also add that reset button. Let's declare that the const ct reset vtn. Most probably I made a spelling mistake in here. Yeah. So in this reset button, I'm gonna write something like documented query selector as well. I prefer using query selector. You can use get element by ID or something. It's totally up to you. Both the syntax are fine, right? So reset minus btn, and just like that, I can write something like this. So let's add an event listener to the reset button as well. So reset dot add event listener. We are gonna listen for the click event. CLICK. Then I'm gonna create an arrow function in here as well. Okay, now I'm gonna say count equals to 0. Okay, and so basically I'm resetting the count, and then counter dot inner HTML is equals to count. Let's save this. Now you see I can increase it, and when I click on reset, it goes back to 0, right? It's just that simple. Yeah. It's really just that simple, right? So that's what we can do. There's also a lot of stuff that we can do in here. So let's see what else we can do with JavaScript. So I'm gonna comment out this script tag as well, just for your reference, and later I guess I'll be sharing this code. Yeah, it's been raining cats and dogs in here, as I mentioned in here, so I had to record this like around 2:30 in the morning, this course for you guys. So I hope you guys really like it, and I'm really sorry if I sound kind of dull. Yeah, the situations in here is not that great, but I'm still trying my best to explain JavaScript in the shortest minimum type possible, so that you can actually create something with JavaScript. Right. So now let's for right now, all we did was you know access normal HTML properties or HTML elements with JavaScript. Okay. Now the second stuff that we can do is we can also change something style. So we can also change the style. Right. I'm gonna comment these out. And I'm also gonna add that div in here for you guys to understand. So yeah, so that you guys can also use the previous script tag as well. Yeah. So now let's do something else. Let's create a button in here, and I'm gonna pass an ID as well. So let's say toggle toggle. So it's gonna be a toggle button. I'm gonna write toggle in here as well. Here's how the button would look, and then here in an h2 I write some text. Okay. Now what I want to do is when I click on this button, I want this text to disappear, and when I click on it again, I want it to reappear or appear again. Okay. So let's try to do that. So first of all, I'll give it an ID as well, because we need to identify all these uniquely, and that's what IDs are for, right? To access something uniquely, to understand or um, uniquely identify an element in HTML. So let's name it toggle text, toggle txt, and let's create a script in here as well. So what I can do is I can say const toggle toggle equals to document dot query selector toggle to. Okay, I see I did make a spelling mistake in here as well. I'm really sorry. Okay, and then again declare the other ones. So it's gonna be toggle text document dot query selector hash toggle text, right? And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say, okay, first of all let's try something else. So first of all let's actually see what's the status of this toggle text. So is it visible or is it not visible? Okay, so for that right now let's say console console.log toggle text dot, I can directly get access to its display by using this property dot style dot display. So it kind of gives me access to its variables. Now you see it doesn't actually have some style or display in here. So let's add that style to it. Let's say display block. Let's save this. Now you see it does have a display of block, right? Let's give it a display of inline just to check it out. We save this, so it now prints out inline. So we are basically accessing the properties inside this style tag. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a event listener, basically a click listener in here. So let's say toggle.add event listener click, and then pass in an arrow function in here, and then I'm gonna check out something. So I'm gonna use an if else statement. So I'm gonna say if toggle text dot style display and equals to, you see I'm using double equals to. So when we want to assign something, like in here, that's when we use a single equals to. But when we want to check something, so let's say we want to check a number is equals to 10, so then I'm going to write number equals to 10. In that case, it's going to return me either true or false, so it's a boolean value. So it's gonna return me either true or false. I'm not going really that deep into programming, because I hope that you guys already have a basic knowledge of any programming language, be it C, be it C++, Java, Python. That doesn't matter, but I'm just considering that you do understand how this stuff works, because there's a lot of ground that we need to cover as JavaScript for web development, not JavaScript for regular programming, but JavaScript for web development, right? So let's check that out. So I can say if toggle text dot style or display equals to let's say block. So I'm gonna say toggle text dot style dot display equals to none, none. None is basically to hide the element, so that element won't be visible anymore. And then if it's not, so if it's not blocked, in that case it would be none, it's already hidden, right? So I can just copy this line in here. From here I can say it's gonna be block. Let's save this. Let's go to elements tag first. Let's highlight this one. So now you see that the display is block, right? In here. Now pay close attention to it. I click on this button. You see the display changes to none. Now it's not visible anymore. I click, and you can also check it in here. So that display style is now applied to it. So yeah, it's either block or it's none. That's how you can play with the CSS properties. Now there's something you need to remember. When you change properties or CSS properties using JavaScript, you don't actually change the properties that's been declared in the CSS file or in the style tag. Rather, you either add something in the style attribute or modify something from the style attribute. That's it. Okay. So you can't actually add CSS, add something in the CSS file or in the style tag. You can only add something in the style attribute, or you can only change properties from the style attribute, right? So I guess that's it for now in here, and I'll be pausing the video for now, and I'll just get back to you. Welcome back, and everyone, and just after a short break, now we'll be covering more JavaScript right now. So let's get started, and let's actually get started by doing something in a time interval. So let's just create another script tag in here, and I'll be commenting out all the other script tags so that you guys can use it later. In this script tag, let's use another inbuilt function, and those will be set timeout and set interval. So let's check out set timeout first. I'll just zoom in code a bit. So what set timeout does is it basically takes in a function, so you can pass an arrow function. So the first argument would be a function, and the second argument would be a time interval. So let's pass in a time interval of 2000. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass in an alert, and let's say executed after 2 seconds. Save this. Let's go back to a page. Let's wait for 2 seconds, and that's when the alert is going to show. Let me demonstrate it again. Let me refresh it. Now you see, let's wait for 2 seconds, and that's when the alert comes in, right? So that's how we can do it. We can even increase or decrease the timer, but the catch is that it has to be a positive number. You can't pass in a negative number, right? So let's wait for 5 seconds. Now it's 1 2 3 4 5 or something. Yeah, and it gets executed, right? So this is what set timeout basically does. The second method that we'll be seeing is set interval, and set interval basically does the same that set timeout does. The point is that set timeout is only executed once, while set interval keeps on executing a particular function again and again and again. Okay, so let's pass in an interval of let's say 1500 seconds. So it's 1500 milliseconds, that basically 1.5 seconds. And in this arrow function, let's say console.log, and let's log out hello. So let's save this. Let's go back to a page. Let's go to the console, and what you're going to see is that every 1.5 seconds it's going to print out hello. That's why this counter keeps on increasing, right? So you can do that. You can also do something, you can also describe a variable in here. Let's say let I equals 0, and what we can do is we can do something like I plus plus, and then console.log it. PS spoiler alert, the counting is going to start from 1 because we did I plus plus. Okay, save this, and now you see 1 2. It basically keeps on logging that value. Okay, so here's how that works. It's great. If you pay attention, then you would see that I've already added some images in here from 1 to 8. And let's create a div in here. I'm gonna add a class to it. Let's add a class of slider. Okay, and here I'm gonna add an image and pass in a default image. So for the default image, I'm gonna pass the image of the cat. You remember that cat's image, right? Now let's go to our CSS, and let's also add an ID to this image. So I can say ID equals to, and let's say slider img, and now I'll be styling the slider img as slider. Let's say it has a width of 100%, and when I say it has a width of 100%, as explained in the previous sessions, it will take the width of the parent element, right? So let me remove this debug console and zoom in to basic. So it has the slider img. If I refresh it, yeah, it gets applied, right? I had to press Control F5 just in case there might be times when you do something in the CSS but the change is not reflected. Okay, there might be some times when the change is not reflected. So that's because that might be because your code has been cached by your browser. So you would sometimes, instead of pressing F5, you would need to press Control F5. It happens rarely, but it does happen. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so now we see it always takes the 100% of the width. And let's say that I also need something else, so dot slider, I'm gonna say that it has a height of, let's say, 80 vh, and even the height of the image would be 80 vh. Vh means viewport, so it's gonna be the height of the viewport, so based on the device's height, right? So here's how it would look. So it will always take in 80% or 80 vh of the height, so that's how I like sliders this way. But the point is that now, right now, the image is static. It's only the image of the cat. I don't want that. I want there to be multiple images, so that the images keep on changing after a particular time interval or something. So let's try to create that. For that, let's first declare an array. So let's say const and images, sorry, images equals to create an array, and in that array pass all the images that you want to create. So it's 1.jpg, 2.jpg, and all. So I'm gonna say one dot slash 2 dot jpg dot slash. Okay, these are jpgs, sorry, not jpegs. So let's try with only 3 images. So first of all, I have to declare this array. Now I do understand that these images that I have added are already numbered, so it's 1.jpg, 2.jpg, but that might not be the case every time. Most of the times you would get some images with really cryptic names. So that's when you need to create an array of those, and that's something that I prefer. You could easily loop through these images, but the point is those have to be numbered properly, right? Okay, now how many images are there? So what I can do is, let's console.log, let's log out the length or number of images. You can see images of length. If I go to my console right now, so now you see 3, because there are, after all, 3 images in this array, right? So at the end there are 3 images in here, that's why it logs out 3. Okay, so that's great. Now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to I'm going to set an interval in here, and like every 1500 milliseconds, so every 1.5 seconds, what I want to do is that first of all I'm going to create sorry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable with I equals to 0, right? And just so you remember, the indexing, so the first element in this array would actually be the index of 0. Just like other programming languages, indexing starts with 0 in JavaScript as well. Okay. So what I can do is, first of all, I can say that the slider image. So let's also get access to it. So I can say slider image dot src. I can directly get the access to its src, this src attribute in here, right? And I can say it's gonna be the images of I, right? Let's save this, and then let's increment I. Like this. Now you see the images start changing, and after a while you're gonna get an error, and the error is that it's an undefined index. Now how could it be an undefined index? It works fine for 0, because the initial value is 0. It works fine with 0, then it gets incremented to 1, it's fine. It gets incremented to 2, it's fine. And then it gets incremented to 3, and that's where the problem is. There is no third index in this array, right? Even if we had a third index, it would throw us an error for the fourth index. There is a limit. So what we need to do is we need to check if I is greater than if I is greater than the length of that array, right? So I'm gonna say images dot length. If I is greater than that images dot length, so I can say I equals to 0. Save it, refresh it. Now you see, second image, third image. Okay, it throws me an error, but it goes back to the first image again. Now why does that happen? Because the length at the end tells you that there are 3 elements, but the indexing is from 0 to 2, right? So it has to be either greater than or equals to. Even if it's equal to images.length, we should always refresh I. So now it goes back, right? So now you can create your own slider that basically changes on its own. Okay, and that's how the frameworks do it for you anyways. So using set interval. So I'm going to comment this script tag as well for now, and instead I'm going to create two really simple buttons in here. So I'm going to say button, and the first text in this button would be a greater than sign. So you can't actually write a symbol like this in here, right? You can, but that's not the preferred way, and it would throw some IDs would even throw you an error. Rather, what you can do is you can say ampersand lt less than. It works the same way, right? And similarly, let's also create a button ampersand gt. It's gonna be less than and greater than symbols. So here are these two cute little buttons. Now I don't want them to be here. I want them to be here on the center. So let's do that. So what I'm gonna say is that in my slider I'm gonna add a position of relative. Okay, save this, and then what I'm going to say is that buttons in the slider. So dot slider button. I'm directly accessing by the tag. And it's a position absolute. Now you see it kind of goes on the top. It's not even visible. The point is that both the elements are there, right? So basically the image kind of overlaps with those buttons. So those buttons are now not visible to you guys most probably. If I check it, that button kind of exists, but we are not able to see that, right? So let's add a z index. That index basically tells the index. So let's assume that it's like a stack of papers. So that image is a stack of paper. Then there's these buttons. What I want to say is that these buttons have to be over the image. Right now they are hidden under the image, but I don't want that. I want them to be over the image. So I can add a huge z index in here. Save this, and let's check this out. Are we still able to see the buttons or not? So I guess we are still not able to see those buttons. Let's check out why. Why is that happening? Okay. First of all, let's also add some position and all. And right now, if I kind of remove that image, let's see if those buttons are visible right now. Let's enter out. Now you see those buttons are there, but I only see one of the buttons. That's because those buttons are still kind of overlapped. So what I can do is I could say dot slider button and nth of type 1. Okay. Say that it goes from the top of 50%. So now you see the first button is now on 50% in here, right? I can, and it has a left of 1 rem. Save this. So here this button is, and I can do the same for the next button as well. So I can say slider button nth of type. We have already covered what the nth of type pseudo classes do, right? So I can say top 50% as well. And now I want the right to be 1 rem. Let's save this. Now see, here's this button, here's that button. Let's uncomment this image, and now we see that those buttons over this image right now. Okay, so those are there, and let's add a font weight to them. So you can say font weight, let's say bolder or bold. Let's add a font size to them as well. So font size of, let's say, 1.5 rem. So yeah, these are bigger right now. And what else we can do? We can add a background of transparent. So I don't actually want a background transparent. Rather, I would change the color. So I can change the color to white smoke, or white, the color that I prefer. Here these buttons are. I also want to remove the outline and the padding. Sorry, outline and the border. So outline none, and border none as well. Save them. Now these buttons are here. I want, when I hover over them, I want my cursor to be a pointer. So I can say cursor pointer. Let's see what it does. Now when I hover over them, look at my cursor, right? It's now a pointer. And let's also add a text shadow. Text shadow is kind of similar to box shadow. The only difference is that it adds shadow to your text. That's it. So let's see 0.1 rem, 0.3 rem. The default values that I kind of prefer. RGBA. Check that out. So even if it's not clear to you guys, but there's this text shadow, it would be more clear if I increase the opacity. So now you can see this text shadow right in here. So it kind of helps our button to these buttons to get in view. So they are more legible. So I'm still gonna remove it to 0.7, and rather I would increase the opacity or alpha from here. Save this. Yeah, it does look much better to me, at least. So now these buttons are ready. What we can do is we can add some IDs to these buttons as well. So let's add an ID, and let's say btn left, btn minus left. I'm gonna copy this and add this ID to the next button as well, and it will be btn right. So let's edit that. Okay, save this, create this, and this. Basically, I'm gonna copy this code from here that we already wrote. So basically, I'm just copying the code of what I have. I actually don't have to select these buttons again as well, right? Now let's also get access to these buttons using query selectors. So I can say const left equals to document query selector. Let's say btn left, btn minus left. I'm gonna copy this and change the value right here. Btn left and btn right. And then I'm gonna say left dot add event listener. So I'm gonna listen for the click event CLICK, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna check if I so basically what left is gonna do is, let's see we are on the let's say that we are on the third image. So what I is gonna do is, so I is basically gonna take it to the previous image, right? So left will actually reduce one value from I. It's gonna decrement I by one. So the case in here would be that if I is equals to 0, then we'll go to the length minus 1, right? So if we are the first element, if it's the first element, if it is indeed the first image that we see, then in that case we'll go back to the last image, right? So let's say if I equals to 0, I equals to images dot length minus 1. Sorry, why did we add minus 1? Because the length of the image would be 3, but the counting would start go, or the indexing would go from 0 to 2, right? Let's refresh this and let's check this out. I guess it's not working. Let's check out why. Yeah, I don't see something in the console. Why would that happen? Yeah, so now why is that happening? Why is this stuff not working anymore? The point is, what if it's not 0? So we would also add an else part in here. So else, and then I is gonna be I minus minus. Right? Save this. Yes, I am clicking over it, and the event listener is not working. So let's check if it's working or not. Let's add a console.log in here. Save this. If I click over it, I do see the click element. Yeah. So I get it is working. The indexing is working after all. And the last part that we need to do is, and then we need to say that the slider image dot src. So the source of the slider image would be images of I, right? So let's save this as well. Now if we check, I guess it's working. Yeah, it's working. Now let's add the same logic for the right part as well. So what I want to say is right dot add event listener is CLICK. Okay. Now for the right part, the catch would be if it's equal to the length, right? So it would go back to the first image. So if I equals to images dot length, I equals to 0, that's it. Else I is gonna be equal to, or I plus plus, let's increment I by 1, and let's copy this line in here, save this. Okay, we do see an error after all, and cannot read add event listener of null. Okay, that's because we made a spelling mistake here. No, it's fine. And it throws an error, right? Why is that? Because if it's equal to the length, so if it's equal to the length, right? What I want to do is, if it's equal to length minus 1, because it's I plus plus. Check that out. It kind of works, right? I see one, two, three. So here's three different images, right? So sliders working, and it also works on the mobile view. So it's this page right here that we created, and to be precise, all the pages that we have created until now in this session, all of them were responsive. And how do we check the responsiveness? This is this little icon in here. Click on it, and now you can see the responsive view, or how your page would look in a mobile phone. So it's really simple, and it's totally working. This image carousel. So we have created our own image carousel in here, right? So I hope it's understandable, and I'll leave this to you guys. And instead of using these images, you can add images from the internet as well. So try to do that. It's an assignment to you guys. So instead of using these images that I hard coded in here, what I want to do it what I want you guys to do it is to edit this array, so that this code would also work for you guys, or just paste in some images in here and rename the array accordingly, right? You can either use images from the internet or something. So I hope it's clear to you guys. So that would be it for the basic JavaScript session for today. Just in case you guys have any doubt of, or any questions on how to use JavaScript, what we do using JavaScript, what can we do using JavaScript. So even the concept that we have covered in this session, the if-else part, the loops, and the functions, event listeners were like the base, most important one. And click event listener is basically the most important one. The other event listeners would be a double click. So let's say DBL click. I guess it's DBL click. Save it. You see, if I click once, it doesn't do anything. If I double click, it does something. It changes, right? So it's double click. The other would be mouse enter. Mouse enter. Save this. Now, whenever I hover over this image, I'm not clicking. I'm not clicking. Whenever I hover over it, it changes. So mouse enter is something like this, and so is mouse leave. Save this. So you see mouse enters, and when my arrow goes away from it, so that's when the image changes, right? That's what mouse leave does. So for right now, I'm going to change it to click, because that's the same one, right? So I hope it's clear to you guys. In case you have comments with the latest JavaScript syntax, why do we use let and const? Where do we use let and where do we use const? Why did we do this? And how to toggle between something? You can remember the set interval. You can even create your own stopwatch or timer or something that you want to do using the set intervals. So right now we are at a set interval of 1500 milliseconds. Just in case you want to create a stopwatch or a timer that adds laps or something, that counts laps or something, right? So in that case, your interval will be 1000 milliseconds. That's equal to 1 second. So thank you guys. Thank you for being patient with us, and we are literally trying our best. Uh, my previous session of Python was way better, way better than this one. It's just the weather around here, so the situation's kind of worsening. But I hope you guys did learn something. And let me know if you guys have any doubt. Post it in the WhatsApp group, or you know, get in touch with me. Ask me some questions, anything you want, right? And just as mentioned before, as a concession, we'll be giving you some other codes as well, or some other videos as well.